Our next speaker is Dr. Tommaso Virgili, who co-authored with Florence Bergeau-Baclair the major report, as said a bit earlier, Unmasking the Muslim Brotherhood, Brotherism, Islamophobia, and the EU. I ask you all, ladies and gentlemen, if you are more interested for the biography and more details of the persons, to scan the little QR code so we can just move on and give the persons the word. Thank you, Tommaso, for joining us.
Thank you, Patricia, Impact, as well as MEP Zedowski and Ruijsen for hosting this event. This is the report that was addressed before, that was commissioned by MEP Weimers, who was here, and published by the ECR group at the European Parliament, which I co-wrote with Florence. And I think this report is quite relevant today at least in its methodology, because what Florence has developed, the concept of frérism, which we try to translate as brotherism in English, applies very well to that alliance of different Islamist forces, Khomeiniist, brotherism, but also leftist, woke, postcolonialist forces that, coming from different perspectives, somehow attain the same goals, which are destructive from the secular liberal democratic system. So in this report, we try to explain how this system works, and also to show that the European Union still keeps financing, legitimizing, and supporting this system, most often not consciously, but exploiting what's the strength of the brotherist system. You might remember a few years back the discussions within the first Trump administration on banning the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a discussion that has gotten new momentum also in France after such a request by the French Parliament. Now, the strength of the brotherist systems lies in the fact that you don't have a single organization that you can ban. Certainly, you can find branches of the Brotherhood. Indeed, Hamas is officially a branch of the Brotherhood that you can ban because of their terrorist networks. But you will find different layers. This is a multi-layer enterprise. In these layers, you find sworn members of the Brotherhood, organizations that have clearly been established by the Brotherhood and that are part of the brand of the Brotherhood, even in Europe, in London significantly. But then you find different layers. You find an organization like Femiso that has been established by members of the Brotherhood, although now it declares its extraneity to the movement. And then you can find additional layers of NGOs, individuals that do not come from that background, but somehow, whether knowingly because they pursue the same goals, or unknowingly because they think of an alliance against imperialism, against Zionism, against whatever you want, are pursuing the same goals of the Brotherhood. And that's the genius of this movement. Because think about it, if you say in the European Union that you would like an apostate or a blasphemer from Islam to be sent to prison, how many allies would you find in the European Parliament? How many allies would you find among NGOs? Well, I fear that somebody you could still find, but I think the vast majority would be against you in the name of freedom of religion and freedom of speech. But if you say that a fascist, colonialist, Zionist, Islamophobe should be sent to prison, well, then many liberals will be on your side, probably, in good or bad faith. And think about all the discussions about banning Islamophobia in Europe, notably in the UK, but I fear that at some point it could arrive also to the EU. Another example, if you say that a woman should be compelled to wear the veil and that the husband should force her to wear the veil, and here I'm quoting the jurisprudence of the European Council of Fatwa Research, a European-based brotherist entity, then again, probably you won't find many feminists on your side. But if you say that the hijab is a symbol of liberation and women's agency, and here I'm quoting projects that we have identified and studied in this report, financed by the EU, then you will find many allies and also conspicuous funding. And that's the genius of the Brotherist system. This is not something that is improvised. This has been elaborated starting from Al-Banna himself and perfected by intellectuals such as Al-Maududi and Al-Qaradawi that understood a very simple thing. What the jihad that you can use in Syria or in Israel or in Egypt or in the UAE cannot be employed in Europe. You don't realize the objective of the Islamic State in Europe through one or two terrorist attacks. But this does not change the ideology which is behind it. Again, if you go and check what the institutes such as the European Council for Fatwa Research is saying about the values we cherish, this is not, you will find that they are not very different from what Salafists say. If you check the literature that was present in Chateau Chinon at the European Institute for Human Science before France shut it down, you will find it's the same literature that appears in a Salafi mosque. What changes is the entrism. And here I get back to what Florence was saying, and that was the object of a comprehensive report released recently by the French Parliament. And this entrism allows you as an Islamist to access the Western system of politics, society, and economy without compromising on your fundamentalist values. This duality can explain why an organization such as Islamic Relief can be, on the one hand, viciously exposed for anti-Semitism to the point that its entire board resigned, to the point that states have stopped funding it, to the point that bank accounts have been shut down. And at the same time, it has received 40 million euros by the European Commission, which recently has acknowledged that maybe is not very opportune to finance Islamic Relief. And still, you would be surprised to hear that even after the Commission has declared that Islamic Relief is not financed anymore, we have identified Erasmus Plus funding to Islamic Relief Germany, still flowing, and also certain branches of Islamic Relief being featured as certified humanitarian partners of DG ECHO. So how can this happen? Well, because this is for a mix of elements which range from blindness to the danger to objective difficulties in digging and identifying what's behind the sugar coat of liberal declarations. Let me make another example, which I think is very important today. The Islamic community of Shia communities in Germany, a Khomeiniist entity linked to the Islamic Center of Hamburg. So Khomeinism, I'm not talking a Shia, Iranian, a clearly identifiable Khomeiniist entity that got EU money, suspense, for a project against radicalization. So the EU, through German authorities, has financed a Khomeiniist organization for fighting radicalization. Why is this relevant also for today's topic? Because this center represents a trade union with the Muslim Brotherhood, because through the Grimm family, the Islamic Center of Hamburg was linked to the Islamic Center of Munich, namely to the epicenter of the Muslim Brotherhood in Germany. Is this a coincidence? Not at all. Florence already mentioned that. Think about what Khomeinism was. Khomeinism was the incarnation of the Islamist project. In a Shia version, of course, the clergy in power would have a very different outlook in a MB system, but in the end, it was the personification of Sharia in power. And notably, it was the personification of Sharia in power with the merging of Ali Shariati and his theories of anti-imperialism. And here we find again this alliance, this green-red alliance that we still have today. The genius of Khomeini was to present the enforcing of the hijab as a progressive and even supported by feminist cause. Think about, again, Islamophobia. Since when have we started debating Islamophobia and censorship against those who criticize Islam? Since the fatwa of Khomeini against Salman Rushdie. So it's not a coincidence if when Mohammed Morsi took power in Egypt, the Al-Quds forces had meetings with him while he was in power, and later also after he lost powers with Egyptian Muslim brothers in Turkey. Because in the end, the ideology is the same. So we should not be blinded by this Shia-Sunni dichotomy. After all, Hamas, which is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, has been supported, financed, and directed by Iran. So this brings me to Islamophobia, which is something that we address very much in this report. And why so? Because the very idea of Islamophobia is a fraud created by Islamist forces. Khomeinism, Muslim Brotherhood, is a fraud because it wants to convince you and convince all of us and convince the European Union as a founder and legitimizer that Islam as a concept, as a system of tenets, must be protected against racism. So it's the idea that if you are attacking the tenets of Islam, is like attacking a black person because of the color of his skin. Now, in a liberal democracy, ideas are not protected. What is protected is individuals. So, of course, you will always find me as an ally in the fight against anti-Muslim hatred, meant as defending Muslims from attacks by crazy individuals that, because of their faith or their origin, wants to harm them or prevent them from exercising their freedom of religion. You will not find me on your side if you're saying that it's an attack on all Muslims if you portray the Prophet on a newspaper, or that is an attack on all Muslims if pork is served in a public canteen, because this is the essence of a secular liberal democracy. And that's where it is important to distinguish the two plans, and that's where it's important to realize that this Islamophobia enterprise, of which we have found hundreds of EU-financed projects, is crucial, like the hijab issue, like exceptions demanded because of the cultural argument within criminal law. This is crucial for the Brotherist, Muslim Brotherhood, and their allies' plan to Islamize society slowly. So to start by carving exceptions, that the jurisprudence of minority of Al-Qaradawi. It's very clear in his mind how this should proceed. And what's relevant is that in these projects we have analyzed, some of them are clearly detectable as Muslim Brotherhood, in the sense that the organizations or the individuals that have taken part in these projects are part of the Brotherhood. In many other cases, no. Maybe because we don't know, could be. But I mean, I don't think that 200 and plus projects are all run and steered by the Muslim Brotherhood. But the message is the same. And the message is that there is a pervasive Islamophobia in our society, and that all so-called neutral policies are there just to subjugate Muslims. And this, if you're familiar a bit with Black Lives Matter and all the debate of critical race theory, is exactly the same language. Basically, that all our society are corrupted by whiteness, and that they are at their core racist against blackness. So it's not anymore a matter of respecting individuals, it's a matter of how would I say, system of groups where neutrality, which could be neutral equality of all individuals, irrespective of faith or color of the skin, the citoyenneté in French, is both racist and Islamophobic. And that's what, that's the danger we are fighting against, because this destroys the social cohesion of our society, which are united on the equality of all human beings. So to conclude, there are good signs on the awareness, at least, the awareness of certain member states, France, Austria, Germany, in different ways. They are moving on this threat. It's not taboo anymore as it used to be to discuss it. We also have MEPs that have raised many questions to have grilled effectively the Commission. The Parliament, the European Parliament, has also acted in the discharge report, which is compelling the Commission, is checking the budget of the Commission, the expenditures of the Commission, and can compel, and it has done it, the Commission not to finance Islamist organizations. We are also noticing a progress in the way EU officials are addressing this matter. So from denying the problem altogether to at least acknowledging it and claiming that they have taken sufficient steps to overcome it. Some steps have been taken, but not enough. Notably, the system of a priori check of entities that are funded by the European Union has been improved, but is still lacking, but it's still too formalistic. It's still too formalistic to prevent that Islamic relief, after tons of parliamentary questions where the Commission says we are not funding anymore Islamic relief, keep being financed or keep appearing on DG ECHO webpage. Because in the end, it's not only a matter of formalism. What we, Florence and I, are advocating is not a system of censorship where we want to silence people even for their fundamentalist tenets. Actually, this is what they want from us. They wouldn't like us to speak, and speak with Florence, who is under protection police protection since she wrote her book, and attend a conference from Florence like the one was organized in Brussels by the Emer party a few months back, and see where is the danger of censorship. It's not from us. So what we want is not censorship. What we want is that people and organizations are colluded with terrorism, like was the case with Samuel Paty and the Council Against Islamophobia in France, be banned indeed. And that instruments of administrative and criminal law be used in these cases. But in all other cases where the criminal threshold is not reached, what we want is the public money to be spent according to the same criteria that are used with other extremist ideologies. Namely, would you think that you would have to convince the European Commission not to meet the Ku Klux Klan in a debate on racism? I don't think we have to demonstrate much to convince, or to put in place very sophisticated legal instruments to convince the Commission that it doesn't have to legitimize the Ku Klux Klan. So how come we still have to convince it that they should not legitimize Islamic relief? That's the end. I mean, at the end, it's also a matter of a cultural revolution that is undergoing, but still has to come to its perfection, I would say. Thank you.